I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here with my friend Yuri Kolomiyets, who is the Director Tech Strategy at Ottawa-based Corsa, a very cool company that I've known for a few years. Yuri, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Ed.
Normally, when you and I are talking, we're sitting together physically somewhere, so it's the sign of the times that we're doing this virtually. So I guess that's okay.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to do this in a completely different format and in these times. But I think we're still moving along and doing cool things despite all the stuff around us.
It's funny, virtual is a good metaphor for what we're going to talk about. I've long been an admirer of the work that goes on at Corsa, and we're going to go through some of that today. You've shared some ideas I think I've just flat out stolen in talks. I think you guys have a lot of really cool ideas, and probably a company that not enough enterprise security teams are familiar with. So hopefully through our video, through the magic of video, I can introduce you to a bigger swath of the marketplace, people that I think would really benefit from hearing what you guys are doing. So first off, let me ask you to do the standard elevator pitch just so we can get started, so people watching know what Corsa is all about. And then we can talk a little bit about some of the cool ideas that I think you guys have. So give us the little the little 101 pitch on the company.
Right. So, like you said, we're an Ottawa-based company. We've been around for a few years. We started off in the SDN space, so software-defined networking, and the whole networking area has been sort of with us from the beginning, and the software-defined part of that. And then we've kind of added the security components, and we started sort of in the load balancing. And what we've done is we've built a platform that allows you to sort of scale network inspection. So it was a really sort of cool platform that does basically unlimited capacity when it comes to doing inline network inspection. So be it sort of TLS decryption or threat prevention or you name it. If traffic volume is the problem you're trying to solve, then we really solve that problem. And as we sort of been working on that, we've also the way we've done it is using virtual infrastructure, right? Virtualized infrastructure, virtual machines. So the idea is that sort of the firewall and the network virtual network functions that are available from the leading vendors are available in virtual. It's a lot easier to scale things when they're virtualized than to try to plug hardware and then ship things and cable things and rack mount them. So as we've built our platform based on the virtualized infrastructure, folks started saying, well, the scale may not, we have there's customers that have the scale problem, but there are other customers who have a problem of just virtualization and automation, right? Specifically, in the MSSP kind of world, or the firewall as a service, managed firewall services, where these companies are managing quite a number of the physical appliances. And having that technology that allows them to virtualize their physical infrastructure was really of interest. So we just announced last week the specific variant for the firewall as a service or managed firewall service provider of our platform that's specifically focusing on automation and orchestration of virtual firewall provisioning, with the idea of sort of converting your physical appliances into the virtual appliances. So maybe a little bit longer than an elevator pitch, but
No, that's
the
okay.
idea.
And we're filming this in late October, so last week would have been mid-October 2020. So
That's right.
that's a fair point. Now, one thing you and I've talked about for a number of years is that this transition from data center, physical to virtual is already a given. But share with us kind of your observations around security and firewall and sort of that physical to virtual journey that if you're not on already, you probably should be, and how you guys support that.
Right, and the interesting part is that, as you said, the enterprise applications or web applications or anything now, so we're moving down to smaller and smaller form factors, sort of from a whole server to a single operating system to a VM to now into a container, right? So, and that is sort of the journey of the application teams and the server infrastructure teams, I guess, that now are really the DevOps teams. But when we look on the network side, we haven't really seen that transition, right? The networking has been sort of still in the traditional, mostly in the traditional realm, and specifically network security. So, when it comes to, deploying appliances really for various network security functions, firewalls obviously being the most common ones, but it doesn't, it's not just about firewalls. It's pretty much every appliance out there when it comes to network security is still a hardware appliance. And that transition to virtualization has been somewhat slow, and there's multiple reasons for that. And this is really what we're doing. We're trying to kind of get through that final frontier of the virtualization and get that data center to sort of completely virtualized infrastructure rather than parts being still in hardware.
Now, talk about the firewall, because as a pretty fundamental component of that network infrastructure, what have you seen with companies that, for whatever reason, maybe they need firewalls for PCI separation, or they need to segregate IT from OT networks, or whatever reason they're putting firewalls in, or they could be providing separation to the internet. Traditionally there's been a hardware appliance that drops in. What's been your, do you see a transition where people are starting to look at virtualization for the firewall function?
Yeah, I think especially in the service provider space, so firewall as a service provider, they definitely see that those hardware operations as a slow point in their sort of customer acquisition and customer engagement cycle, where time to value, it still sort of involves purchasing a hardware appliance and receiving a hardware appliance and racking a hardware appliance and cabling and configuring, and most of the focus in that area on automation is on the policy automation, right? So once the firewall came into existence, how do I make sure that on a day-to-day basis, my changes are correct and the policies are consistent, and customer to customer things are good, but the provisioning of the infrastructure is still by and large a manual, human-driven process. And they actually are realizing it. It's not a sort of novel idea. I think the service providers like AT&T have been talking about that no hardware for a decade now probably. And so the concept is there, especially in the service provider space, maybe less in the enterprise space. Enterprise are still kind of very much entrenched in the hardware business. But in the service provider space, there is the understanding that that's the way to go. The next sort of barriers, what we're seeing, we're talking to the enterprise architects and just general architects, and they're saying, well, we're starting on this journey, right? And we're learning what it will take for our organization to do that. And do we have in-house resources? Do we have how do we augment the network team that may not have the expertise in virtualization, that doesn't know how what hypervisors are and how to manage these things. So now how do we bring do we have these in-house experts on the server side and maybe bring that on, augment the team that way and do that, or is there something off the shelf that's available? So they're starting the investigation part while sort of the business is still saying, hey, we want revenue, we want to scale the service, we want to go from so like the ones that have a dozen customers want to go to 100 customers, the ones that have 100 customers want to go to 1,000 customers, and they're saying, how do we do that? So the business is sort of pushing these enterprise architects to saying, how do we build this service faster and more consistent and less error prone and cheaper, effectively, more cost effective, and so that it's able to scale the service. So that's, I guess, where we're coming in. That's sort of the problem we're trying to solve.
I know that, having come personally from the telco space, it's an ROI kind of decision, like this, from soup to nuts, virtualization, drives economics that are pretty amazing. I get all the flexibility that comes with it in terms of maintenance, support, update, all the things that you worry about as an operator. But I just love the economics. I think it really makes things.
Right, right. And you know, if you look at the benefits, right, when people went, you know, from bare metal applications to virtualized application to now to containers, you know, now you understand these things of, you know, continuous integration and continuous delivery, right? And, you know, the idea that the same concepts of continuous integration and continuous delivery can be applied to networks and network security specifically, right, is quite, I don't know, I would say that's
Yeah,
a
that
game
is
changer.
very cool. No, that is very, it is cool. Not
I'm
enough
actually,
people talking
you know,
about it. Yeah.
I'm actually quite excited about all this. You know,
Yeah.
I'm reading the, you know, the continuous delivery book by Des Humble right now. You know, and the whole idea, you know, the things that they talk about in terms of sort of application, you know, delivery and cutovers, you know, you could definitely relate and say, well, that all applies to firewall refreshes. You know, the same
Definitely
exact
does.
thing. All
Yeah,
right,
I
and
love the idea.
so that's, you know, if you take these concepts and you say this can be done in the network and it can be done safely and securely and consistently, you know, that's what we're talking about. You know, that's the whole concept of infrastructure as code that
Yeah.
people,
Tell me
you
what
know,
that
now.
means. That's a good one. Explain that. That's a deep topic.
Right. So you know, if we are talking about sort of the you know, containerization of the applications and all that, so that, you know, now it's not a documentation manual that somebody wrote and said, you know, on the day of migration thou shalt, you know, do this. Um, it's now, you know, the code that drives the infrastructure itself, and that code is, you know, provisioning and automating and deploying and building, and it builds in, you know, whether it's a local data center or it's a you know, cloud data center in AWS or in Azure, it really doesn't matter anymore, right? That this whole mentality of continuous integration is really there, and people are embracing that and adopting that. But again, by and large, that is a sort of text-based, script-based thing where you have a, you know, developer kind of person that is comfortable with, you know, pushing code into GitHub and running diffs on releases and doing these things. And, you know, yes, in the network space, we kind of did that with, you know, configuration changes and you know, configuration backups. But it's really not that you know, paradigm that, you know, to really run the networks. You know, maybe again in the service provider space with, you know, netconf and sort of full automation. But when it comes to even smaller, you know, firewalls as a service providers or, you know, enterprises, it's still sort of, you know, you have a CMDB that manages your configs and inventory and all that. And so getting to that new paradigm that you know, that is infrastructure as code is a pretty big gap. Like that's a pretty, you know, far apart, where you can go from, you know, I'm configuring a router or a firewall to I'm pushing code into, you know, a CI pipeline that is driving something. And that is, you know, culturally, like just culturally, maybe a too far of a gap. And what we have, our approach is to bridge that gap by providing a nice graphical user interface for the customer, so that they don't need to, you know, so that they get the same benefits of sort of infrastructure as code and everything is software driven. Again, back from our SDN days, but now everything is software driven, without having to actually write the scripts and write the software, right? That the customer can drive the whole thing with, you know, workflows and automation and orchestration through, you know, configuring adapters, right? If you're saying, okay, I have an adapter for this vendor and I have another adapter for this vendor, I just need to provide some configuration. And from there, I have a nice user interface that drives the whole thing, and I don't need to learn how CI pipelines work. So that's how we're bridging the gap. So I think we're bringing the benefits of the you know, infrastructure as code and all of that paradigm to the network operations and security operations without having to really make that leap into doing things in a completely different way.
That is so cool. You know, Yuri, as an analyst, people always come up to me, whether we're having a beer together or on the phone or something, and they say, "Hey, meet any cool companies lately?" I always bring up you guys. I always think I think Corsa is such a cool company with great ideas. Give us a little bit about the company. How long have you been in business? Do you focus on big, medium, small? I know the answers to these, but for the folks watching, I don't often do that in these videos. You know, we usually try and stay away from that. But I'd like people watching to learn a little bit more because I think just the discussions with your team in my mind, are generally in the right areas. I mean, again, networking and virtualization and security and integrating and continuous delivery. These are all music to my ears, and the fact that you're synchronizing these and orchestrating them into your platform, I think is awesome. But share a little bit about the company. I think people should learn more about Corsa.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So yeah, we've been around for a few years. I think 6 years now, 7 years actually. And as I said, we started in the SDN space, and giving that software control to networking so has always been sort of the idea, right? That it's the software that over time is going to drive the network. So we've been kind of in that space and in that paradigm since the beginning. And what we started was the sort of high performance actual hardware, right? So we started as kind of hardware experts that allow software to drive our hardware, and then we've moved into the security space as the kind of the hardest networking problem. I would say is that we weren't interested in solving easy problems. We were looking for the hard problems to solve, and network security specifically at volume was a pretty hard problem to solve, right? And our expertise in packet level manipulation and traffic steering and traffic management was what led us there. And then we've built up the whole platform that we've built virtualization around that. So now we went from sort of networking, security, virtualization, and all of that is being orchestrated and software driven. So I think those are the real four kind of big areas that on its own would need, take a whole company to do that. And we are kind of in a very unique position where we're bringing all those things at once to the same product, right?
Mm-hmm.
That now we're building this turnkey platform where the customer doesn't need to know how to spec the hardware if they don't if a network team has never bought servers, right? Specifically the ones suitable for running firewall VMs, they would be probably overwhelmed in terms of how do I even go about buying the server. So we have expertise in that, and then they say, well, what do I do with the software on top of that? Well, we have expertise in that. And it's like, well, how do I get networking on top of that? Well, we have expertise in that. So it is really unique, and I appreciate the kind words that we are bringing all these areas together. And we are also, so that's one side, and the other side is we're completely sort of vendor agnostic, multi-vendor, where we work with we build this ecosystem, and we work with we have connectors for firewall vendors, and we have connectors for service management applications, and it is really an ecosystem, right? Everybody wants to build a platform, but I think now if you look at infrastructure, it never lives in a vacuum, right? There's always these things around it, and that's what we're bringing in, and I think it's pretty unique to us. Where if it was a purely software company, they wouldn't know how to deal with network security, and if it was a network security company, they would potentially struggle with the virtualization and automation, and so having that intersection of that Venn diagram, and of course is sitting in the middle, I think is pretty cool, and that's what makes us different.
So teams doing network security at the enterprise level, data center security, edge protection, firewall teams, folks, even on the network side, maybe not with security responsibility, maybe the guys or gals doing load balancing. These are the kinds of folks that should probably be in touch with you and hear your story, right? And I assume the website best place for them to schedule some discussion.
Corsa.com is a great place to start. Should find lots of cool info. some really cool white papers and about
Yeah.
virtualizing and that virtualization journey for people who are potentially either considering or just already starting on that journey. Would be a good place to go. So www.corsa.com. And yeah, we're happy to talk to everybody, even if you not necessarily a potential customer and you want to talk about these things and virtualization, I'm happy to engage and have these discussions anytime.
I recommend it. I've learned a lot from your team, and you in particular. I do appreciate the time you've helped us learn about these topics, which I think are going to go from little things to bigger things to eventually, I think it'll subsume the way we do networking in the data center. So, Yuri, I want to thank you on behalf of our team and for the people watching. Thanks for taking some time. I guess with virtual, it's easier for us to do this than us traveling, between countries. But once the pandemic wanes, I'll look forward to seeing you face to face again.
Absolutely. I miss the New York City. Thanks for having me.
Great, my pleasure. And for everyone else, we'll see you next time.